80 Days, adventurer and award-winning filmmaker Paul G. Roberts retraces the global footsteps of Phileas Fogg, hero of Jules Verne's most famous work.
So in a travel series like this one, 80 Days, you might think that I would be dipping and diving into what I consider the romance or the glory days of the romance of travel. And you will know some names, some iconic names. There's the 747, probably the most loved large format passenger aircraft to ever fly. There's the Concorde, the tragic Titanic. But out of all of those iconic names, there's probably none more iconic and legendary and intrigue-inducing, and it's the Orient Express. Now, my inaugural journey on the Orient Express takes the classic route from Paris to Venice, which was once called the gateway to the Orient. And this breathtaking journey travels through rural French farmlands, past Italian Swiss lakes, Swiss Alpine valleys, across the lagoon into that city of cities, that city of dreams, that mystical city, Venice. Now, up front, I have a confession to make, that the Orient Express never really made it into the original book of 1872. In fact, the inaugural voyage happened a decade later. But in the 2004 film, the Orient Express was made a feature of it, and it's too good a travel icon to miss. So it's going to go into my series, 80 Days, as well. Now, for most of us, the name, even the words Orient Express, conjure up images of romance, intrigue, espionage, adventure, and even murder.
A passenger has died. He was murdered. The murderer is on the train with us now. And every one of you is a suspect.
Some romantics say the modern iterations of the Orient Express today are a far cry from the original that author Cookridge lovingly and nostalgically wrote about. He said, kings and crooks, millionaires, refugees, big game hunters and smugglers, prima donnas and courtesans, all travelled on it. Tycoons and financiers clinched their deals across its sumptuous mahogany dining tables. Diplomats, spies, revolutionaries on board the train moved secretly to their moments of history.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're in distinguished company. Moreover, you're in dangerous company. For you're about to join Hercule Poirot, the international detective no less, in the most celebrated whodunit ever conceived by the mastermind of Agatha Christie.
So, for me, a travel buff, if there was to be one name, one entity that summed up the glamour and romance of old world travel, it has to be the Orient Express. It was before the Concorde, before the dawn of private jets and luxury Emirates cabins. Royalty and high society members would travel through Europe, old Europe, mysterious old Europe, on board luxury trains. The Orient Express is, was, and will always be seen as the epitome of luxury and refinement from the world of travel. It was back in a time when the mighty Louis Vuitton only made steamer trunks. You know, the kinds that you would take on board the Titanic or the Orient Express. And just like this picture, which is a 1920s, a genuine 1920s vintage Louis Vuitton trunk in monogram, 80 centimeters, Louis Vuitton steamer trunk. And today you can have that for the measly sum of 52,000 American dollars. But the Orient Express was more than just a simple train. It was also an idea, the legendary train linking Europe with Asia. And as such has been immortalized in so many books, so many films, so many movies, so many series. And this combination of intrigue and glamour drew writers, famous authors to the train too. In Istanbul Train, published in 1932, 2 years before Agatha Christie's novel, author Graham Greene, which was published in 1932, describes how the lives of a murderous thief, a Jewish businessman, a revolutionary leader, a lesbian journalist, and a chorus girl all intertwine on the train. Greene revisited the train in 1969 in his book Travels with My Aunt. But to me, probably the most iconic, memorable scene ever recorded in film on the Orient Express was with Sean Connery's Bond battling Robert Shaw, the ice-cold, evil agent, double agent of Schmersh, who was found because of his poor taste in wine, and that's all from a gentleman who gets his martini shaken, not stirred. But probably the most wasted opportunity for the Orient Express, in literature anyway, came in Bram Stoker's Dracula, where the 1897 novel used the Express just as a shorthand for speed, as a novelist may have used the Concorde, for example. But just imagine what would have been in the story if Dracula boarded the train at Budapest. What a film it could be, what a film it still would be. Can you imagine? Dracula aboard the Orient Express.
May, Budapest.
And more recently, the latest iteration of the legendary train is chugging back into action, big screen action, as director Kenneth Branagh tries his hand at bringing back Agatha Christie's classic murder mystery tale, Murder on the Orient Express.
And I can see everyone.
Who takes up the knife?
Cannot trust no one. No one?
In Istanbul, Uber detective Hercule Poirot is urgently recalled to London. And the only choice of conveyance for a man of his discerning taste who is also in a hurry is the Orient Express. As he boards, he encounters an assortment of glamorous characters, amongst them a Hungarian count, a Swedish missionary, a Russian princess, and an obnoxious American played by Johnny Depp. Gary Franklin, who's vice president of Belmont's Trains and Cruises, said the experience of the Orient Express is like a private jet on wheels. And the carriages are not merely places to sit, they're art pieces, museum pieces. And you're going through the countryside in northern France, and you wake up in your bed with your breakfast delivered to you. You pull up the blinds, and there's the splendor of the Swiss Alps and the Swiss lakes, all passing by your window. He said, and you're having lunch as you go across the lagoon to Venice. Can you imagine that? So before the dawn of private jets and business class flights, royalty and high society members travelled through Europe aboard luxury trains. And there was no other luxury train like the Orient Express. But now, anyone can do it. All you need is to be cashed up. And if you're willing to spend $2,300 US for a one-night trip, it's yours. Because that's the starting rate from the Florence to Paris aboard the Venice Simplon Orient Express, a historic luxury train operated by none other than the makers of those steamer trunks, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, with their Belmont-owned travel brand. Other routes cost more, much more. Most trips only last one night. I guess it's bragging rights, what you have to spend to say you went on the Orient Express. Others are longer, such as the popular 5-night journey that retraces a historic route from Paris to Istanbul, which was then called Constantinople. This train travels once a year in August, and the cabins usually sell out 1 year in advance. Prices for the annual trip make the one-night bookings look like a steal. Twin cabins for the run to Istanbul are nearly $50,000 US per journey, while grand suites sell for an eye-popping $150,000.
Istanbul, roam the maze of bazaars to the unique Blue Mosque. This must be the city on 7 hills. Your chariot awaits for our iconic Istanbul journey to Paris on the legendary Venice Simplon Orient Express. The evening is our own as we glide through Bulgaria to Bucharest. Let's not miss our royal invitation to Palace Castle. Alight into Budapest, the Queen of the Danube. We'll dance through Italy together and onto the dizzy heights of the Swiss Alps. A romantic stop-off for some bubbles at their origin, before arriving at our journey's end, Paris.
But enough about the price points of today's opportunity to travel. How did it all start? Where did the legend begin? Well, come with me on a journey and I'll take you back in time to the 1800s, 10 years after the book Around the World in 80 Days was first published.
Part of our heritage is always using the true item and the true material. On board of our trains and cruises, we don't have anything fake. So basically every single material we'll use, every single supplier we'll use, every single designer will always be linked to our history, and we'll have mastered the art, being of metal, being of sanding, being of marquetry, being of painting. Whatever the art is, the Venice Simplon Orient Express carriages encapsulate all this craftsmanship.
In 1865, a prominent Belgian banker's son named George Knakelmakers first envisaged a train in Europe that would span the entire continent, running on a continuous ribbon of metal for more than 1,500 miles. As E.H. Cookridge writes in Orient Express, The Life and Times of the World's Most Famous Train, it was during a trip to America that Knakelmakers witnessed the many innovations in rail travel there. Chief amongst them, George Pullman's unprecedented, luxurious sleeper cars. And Knakelmakers returned, determined to realise his vision in Europe. In 1883, after a number of false starts, financial troubles, and difficulties negotiating with the various national railway companies, Knakelmakers' company, Internationale des Wagons-Lits, wagon-lit meaning sleeper cars in French, established a route from Paris to Istanbul, which was then called Constantinople. The newspapers dubbed it the Orient Express, though Istanbul was as far towards the Orient as this train would ever travel, and Knakelmakers and the rest of the world embraced the name. It was called the King of Trains, and some actual kings travelling aboard the train infamously exhibited very odd, unkingly behaviour. Ferdinand of Bulgaria, scared to death of assassins, was observed locking himself in the bathroom. Belgium's King Leopold II rode the train to Istanbul after making elaborate arrangements to infiltrate a Turkish man's harem. The King of Bulgaria, an amateur engineer, insisted that he be allowed to drive the train through his country, which he did at perilous speeds. Tsar Nicholas II demanded that special cars be built just for his visit to France. And some decades later, the French president, Paul Deschanel, clumsily tumbled from one of these cars in the dead of night, an event that prompted such ridicule that he eventually resigned from politics. In its heyday, the train duly earned another nickname, which was Spies Express. Continent-hopping secret agents loved the train, writes Cookridge, since it simply made their jobs so much easier and their travels so much more comfortable. One of the most remarkable of these agents was the English agent Robert Baden-Powell. Yes, that's the guy who invented or created the Boy Scouts, who posed as a lepidopterist, shout out to Kingsman the movie, collecting samples in the Balkans. His intricate sketches of the forms and colours of butterfly wings were actually coded representations of the fortifications he spotted along the Dalmatian coast, which served as a great aid for the British and Italian navies during World War I. Though the two world wars severely limited Orient Express service, a single car played a fascinating symbolic role in both. On November the 11th, 1918, German officers signed a surrender document in an Allied commander's Wagon-Lee car, which he used as a mobile conference room. The French proudly exhibited the car in Paris until June 1940, when Hitler ordered that it be hauled to the precise spot where the Germans had been forced to surrender 22 years before, and there he dictated the terms of the French surrender. 4 years later, when Hitler's loss seemed imminent, he ordered the car to be blown up, lest it become a trophy for the Allies once more. The era of such intrigue and excitement aboard the Orient Express may well be over. I hope not. But in a world that becomes more connected each day, and one which there's no shortage of luxury travel options, nonetheless, much of Nakalmaka's vision lives on. No question, it's become the most famous train in history. And perhaps the Orient Express is more than any one train, and is instead a cultural symbol of Europe's history and the thirst for travel. In this way, it's sure to live on in novels and films, and in the zeitgeist for many decades to come.